With the 15th pick and with the 26th pick in the 2019 NFL Draft, the Washington Redskins select Dwayne Haskins, Montez Sweat.
Welcome, all my fellow Redskin brethren and sistren. I am your man and resident Redskins fan, Lou. Thank you for joining me here on the Redskins Report. So I felt like this was the perfect time to do this. Redskins are on a Week 10 bye. We've seen 9 weeks of football from this team, and it feels like the season's over, and there's really no reason to watch other than Dwayne Haskins and his development. And so I think it's the perfect time to reflect on the season that was, even though there's still 7 games remaining on the slate for the Redskins. Feels like the season's already over. But yes, we still do have 7 games remaining, but we all know that those 7 games essentially have been reduced to seeing the young guys continue to progress. And really, the one thing that you actually probably care about at this point, yep, you'd love to see Cole Holcomb continue to get better. You'd love to see guys like Darius Guy stay healthy and play down the stretch and play well and give you some hope for the future. You'd love to see Montez Sweat start to pick it up and maybe start to gain some confidence. Yeah, you'd love to see a lot of these guys step in and play well down the stretch. But at the end of the day, it's all about Dwayne Haskins and his development. All right, so I think that's the one thing we can all agree upon, that's the one thing worth watching for the remainder of this season. But I thought it was the perfect time to kind of reflect on this season, give out some awards, talk about some things that didn't go the way we maybe anticipated or wanted to this season. And it's the perfect time because this bye kind of splits the season somewhat in half. And so wanted to kind of give out some midseason awards, talk about some things that we may have talked about in the past, but kind of reiterate them here because we're at the midpoint of the Redskins season. So I thought this was the perfect time to do a midseason report. So let's jump into that right now. And before I do, I want your opinion on all of these. I want you to give me the players, or what would go into these categories for you. I'm going to give you mine, and I'd love to hear from you guys as to what you would put in some of these respective categories. If you got the time and you feel like answering every single one of these categories, by all means, please do. I'd love to read it down in the comment section. But whatever you do, make sure you leave a comment, whether it's one category, 2, or all 6 of the categories I've decided to talk about and touch upon on this video. So without any further ado, let's get to my Redskins mid-season report. And so we start with the first category for me, most surprising Washington Redskin this season. And for you, it could be a guy that really disappointed you, even though I have a separate category for that. But it could have been a guy that you really were thinking was going to really play well this year and hasn't, and that surprised you. Or you could be just talking about a guy that played really well and exceeded your expectations. That's the way I decided to go with this one. And for me, I think this one might be a no-brainer for some, may not be, but for me, it's Ereck Flowers. I mean, this was the guy we wanted off the roster going into the season. We thought that the preseason was far enough for us. We didn't want him to make it onto the 53-man roster. We didn't think this guy was going to play. We thought he was going to get the quarterback, whomever that may be, killed. He wasn't going to be very good in the run game. He's going to be a penalty machine, and he's been anything but the consummate professional. Or I should say he's been nothing but the consummate professional. Maybe the best offensive lineman we've had this season. That may be a stretch. It may not be. We've had a lot of guys make mistakes. He hasn't really been among them. You know, when you start talking about penalties, obviously you start with Morgan Moses. Brandon Sheriff has had his fair share, even though some of those I thought were bogus. But he's had his number called a ton this year. So is Chase Roulier. But the guy that really hasn't been picked on a bunch is Ereck Flowers, and we didn't think we were getting this out of him. We didn't think that this would be more than a 1-year experiment. Now we're all saying, hey, you got to bring this guy back. Remember, this was a 1-year deal, and now we're sitting here saying, hey, lock this guy up for the next 3 years on a very modest deal because this is home for him now. So you should be able to pay Ereck Flowers something relatively inexpensive, keep him here for the next 3 years, and feel like you have a left guard that is still relatively young that you can grow with along this offensive line. So you feel like Ereck Flowers has exceeded expectations. For me, he's the most surprising Redskin thus far this season. So the next category for me is the most disappointing. And this could be a player, this could be a coach, this could be a collective unit, this could be whatever you want it to be. There's a lot to go around with this Redskins team. When you're 1-8 and this season hasn't gone the way that you expected it to, for some, I thought we were going to be bad. I don't know if I expected 1-8 bad, worst team in the league type of bad, but I knew we were going to be bad this year. I predicted that this was a 6-10, 5-11 team. I had told you that all offseason long. A lot of you did not want to hear that. And I understand why, but at the end of the day, reality is reality. And so for me, there are two things that stuck out for me when you're talking most disappointing. And for me, they were the defense, number one, and number two, the Trent Williams situation. And let's start with the defense, because that was supposed to be the crutch that this team was able to lean on. If things got tough offensively, as they have the last 4 weeks or so, where the Redskins haven't been able to amass a single touchdown over the last 3.5 games. But we felt like the one thing we'd be able to lean on was the defense. And that was supposed to be all season long, barring injuries. Well, that unit hasn't really been that banged up. They've been relatively healthy this season. Obviously, minus a couple of guys that we thought we'd be able to count on, like a Reuben Foster. But again, I can't miss something that I've never had. Can't miss a player in the lineup that we've never seen in the burgundy and gold. And then, Josh Norman's been banged up, but he hasn't been playing well even when he was healthy. So, and Quentin Dunbar's been banged up. I think that's the biggest injury. It was the biggest injury last year defensively, was Quentin Dunbar's absence. And it's been the same thing this year. When he's been on the field, he's been by far and away the best guy in that secondary. When he's been out, teams have went after our corners. But then again, they've went after our corners all season long. So the defense is, to me, the biggest disappointment, because we thought this was going to be a fringe top 10 unit. Now, a lot of you were getting crazy. Top 5, top 10. I didn't utter those words, but I thought this could be a fringe top 10 unit. And if the ball bounced our way, if guys stayed healthy, if guys exceeded expectations, yeah, maybe we could crack the top 10. But I was looking for like the 12th rated defense in the league, something like that, where you could really be proud of that unit and feel like, hey, these guys are going places, and they could win us a ball game or two throughout the course of the year, cause some turnovers, wreak a little bit of havoc. We thought this defensive line was going to be able to get to the quarterback. They have at times, haven't, but I think more or less they've done their job. It's been the absence of Ryan Kerrigan, not really getting much from Montez Sweat quite yet. Ryan Anderson actually has played better than he has in his past seasons, but still not good enough to rival some of the other edge rushers just in the division. Forget about the rest of the league. Hell, the Giants have Marcus Golden lighting it up this year. We don't have one guy that has matched his sack total for the Giants, and they took a flyer on Marcus Golden. They didn't expect that kind of production from him. So the edge rushers haven't really lived up to their billing. The linebacker position has been underwhelming at best. And then the secondary has been a huge, massive disappointment, with Josh Norman leading that charge. Landon Collins has been okay. He hasn't been great. Monte Nicholson has been in and out of the lineup with injuries. And really, I was hoping that Monte would be huge this year and it'd be a massive bounce back for him. And it simply hasn't been that for him. And so the defense has been arguably one of the biggest sore spots for this football team this season. And it's led by a guy that I think really shouldn't be coordinating any defense in this league. He's nothing more than a positional coach at best. And so I think that's part of the struggle of the defense, but you guys get the picture. And then the Trent Williams situation, I think that goes without even mentioning. I really don't have to get into the meat and potatoes of that situation. It started bad, it went to worse, and then it became untenable. And now we're at the point where we already saw this coming. The writing was on the wall back in August when I made the video saying that he was never going to play another snap for the Redskins. Now we actually have the details to go along with all the rumors that were floating around back in August. And so I thought he wasn't going to play then. I feel that way now, and it's being even reassured now that he's never going to play another snap for the Redskins. But the Redskins should have already traded Trent Williams. It's an ugly situation for a guy that should have been here. Point blank, end of discussion. Trent Williams was supposed to start his career and end his career as a Washington Redskin. He was supposed to go into the Hall of Fame as a Redskin. I don't know how that's going to go now. If he, in fact, is a Hall of Fame player, will he want his bus in Canton to read Washington Redskin or wherever he ends up being traded? It feels like a Champ Bailey type of situation where you watch a guy grow, you feel like he's supposed to be your own, and then he ends up having the best years of his career elsewhere and goes into the Hall of Fame with another organization. That could literally happen with Trent Williams, and that's a sad state of affairs, because what if he plays another 5 or 6 years? Trent, I think, has that in him potentially, and left tackle is one of those positions that, like an Andrew Whitworth, you can play for a number of years. He could go somewhere else, play 6 outstanding years, be an All-Pro 3 of those years, be a Pro Bowl all 6 of those years, and then go into the Hall of Fame as a member of the Cleveland Browns. I mean, that would absolutely crush a lot of Redskins fans, but that's where this situation is. And to me, that's one of the most disappointing things about the 2019 season for the Redskins. We go to the next category, most improved player. For me, I've got 2 guys, or it really is not just player, most improved. It could be a coach. It could be a member of this team. It could be a staff member. It's whatever you want it to be. For me, it's a couple of players. And so my most improved actually, that's not the right graphic there, but I have it here in front of me. Most improved for me is Quentin Dunbar and Eric Flowers. So for me, Eric Flowers, again, everything that I echoed during the most surprising, you can just kind of cut and paste it here. So I don't need to really go into Eric Flowers and why he is my most improved. But then Quentin Dunbar for me is a guy that I saw coming last year. But remember, the injury kind of hampered his season, and he wasn't the same guy when he tried to come back. Remember that Thanksgiving game versus the Cowboys where he got torched? Well, Amari Cooper torched everybody, but Dunbar looked like a shell of himself. He wasn't the same guy. He wasn't right. And so after that, I think he ended up hitting IR. Dunbar, I felt like, could be the best corner on this team and really one of the better corners in this league. And he showed that this season. I think he took that next step. I feel really good about Quentin Dunbar. The biggest thing for him is health. If he can stay healthy, Quentin Dunbar for me is the guy that I think could lead that secondary unit into the future. The Redskins have locked him up. He's going to be around for, I think, at least the next 2, maybe 3 seasons. So if he can stay healthy, he's young. He's still learning the position, as crazy as that sounds. But remember, he was an ex-wide receiver at Florida. So I think he's growing into his body. He's starting to understand the position. You see the level of confidence that he has. I see him being a playmaker. And so Quentin Dunbar and Eric Flowers are my most improved. Sorry for the graphic. Excuse that graphic. But that graphic is going to be very pertinent for another category that we will talk about a little bit later on. But let's move on to the next category, which is team MVP. For other positions, you could have a lot of different choices. Like, for instance, most disappointing, you could have the right side of the offensive line. I mean, Morgan Moses, Brandon Sheriff hasn't been as good as we thought they were going to be. They are supposed to be the leaders of this team and leaders of the offensive line, and at times they were the most disappointing. If you're talking most improved, you could go in a number of different directions and pick out players that have impressed you this season. For me, though, team MVP, I don't even know if this is up for debate. There aren't many choices. The Redskins are 1-8. They stink on both sides of the football. There aren't many guys that you can look to and say that he's the team MVP. And so for me, this is one of the easiest decisions I had to make. And for me, team MVP is Adrian Peterson. Adrian Peterson. AD has been the guy, which it almost seems laughable looking back at week 1 when Jay Gruden decided it was a good idea to bench him and not have him active. He's been the one bright spot offensively week in, week out since Jay Gruden's been fired. And really, if you want to be honest, Adrian Peterson is the one guy that we can count on week in, week out. We love Terry McLaurin. We love what he's brought to the table. But teams are starting to try to take him away. And unless we have other guys step up, and Terry McLaurin may be a non-factor for much of the remainder of the season. Now, it's the Redskins' job to scheme him open and find ways to get him the football. That's no excuse that other teams are trying to take him away. Other teams try to take away Mike Evans. He still ends up with 10 catches. Teams try to take away Michael Thomas. He still ends up with 9, 10 catches every single game. If you have good players, teams are going to schematically try to take them away. It is your job to find ways to get them open. So Terry McLaurin is a guy that if you wanted to make team MVP, knock yourself out. The one game that we won, we scored 2 touchdowns. He was the guy that scored both of the touchdowns. So I totally would understand that. But for me, Adrian Peterson is the one guy that we can lean on every single week. He's the one guy that you expect to have any kind of statistical success moving forward. He's the one guy that you feel like every single week is leaving it out on the football field. And not to say that other players aren't, but you see it visually with Adrian Peterson. How about that stiff arm versus the Bills, on an 8-yard run that should have been a 2-yard run? Like, he literally hip tossed that defender. It took me back to shades of his time in Minnesota when he was running down the sideline and literally hip tossed a defender, then reaccelerated and scored a touchdown. He's still that guy, just less explosive. But to me, team MVP is none other than AD. So now you get to my number 5 thing that I want to talk about, and it's one thing I'd change about the season. Now, let's be really, really candid here. All right. Obviously, you'd want to change the record. Let's not be so vain as to just talk about wanting to change the record. Instead of being 1-8, we're 8-1. Obviously, anybody would want to do that. Let's be realistic. This isn't a good football team. So let's not try to focus on the easy, low-hanging fruit of change the record or, change a specific game. Maybe you would like to change the Cowboys game, and instead of the Redskins losing, they win. That's low-hanging fruit for me. I'm being more realistic. Within the scope of this season, all right, for what the Redskins are, which is a bad football team, what's the one thing that I'd like to change? Obviously, Bruce Allen getting fired. Again, low-hanging fruit. Those things go without saying. No, we don't want the Redskins to be 1-8. No, we don't want Bruce Allen to be here. No, we don't want Daniel Snyder to still own the team. No, those are things that, to me, they're not changing. And so let's focus on the things that could have been changed. Like maybe Greg Minuski getting fired after week 3, or maybe Greg Minuski being fired after week 2, or something like that. Be more realistic with your answer. One thing you'd like to change about the season. Here's mine as we get into week number 10 in this bye week. The one thing I'd change about the season is the head coaching change. Instead of Bill Callahan getting the nod after Jay Gruden was fired, I know Kevin O'Connell doesn't have the head coaching experience that you would like in a situation like this. And Bill Callahan was the assistant head coach. So he was essentially the next guy in line, sort of like a president, vice president type of thing. But for me, knowing what we know now and how Bill Callahan is running this ship, I would have liked to have seen Kevin O'Connell. This is my thing. If we're starting to gain information about the future, if we're starting to gain pieces of the puzzle that we want to take with us into 2020, one of the biggest things we wanted to see was what Kevin O'Connell brought to the table as an offensive play caller. We really wanted to see if this guy had the chops like a Sean McVay, like a Kyle Shanahan, like a Matt LaFleur. We wanted to see if he had that kind of ability to become a head coach in this league. And we wanted to see if his influence on this offense was great enough that he could potentially be the next Washington Redskins head coach. How would he mesh with Dwayne Haskins? Could he call a great game that allowed Haskins to flourish? Limited experience for Haskins, limited experience for Kevin O'Connell in that role. How would the two mesh together? Would that be a pairing that we could see together for many years to come? These are all things we would like to have seen signs of in the final 11 games of the season after Jay Gruden was fired. But instead, Kevin O'Connell was promoted to offensive coordinator, and really he was already the offensive coordinator, but he wasn't calling the plays. Now he was going to get the opportunity to call the plays, or so we thought. Bill Callahan was going to be promoted to head coach, and we thought Kevin O'Connell was going to have an opportunity to put his thumbprint on this offense. Instead, we've gotten a lot of vanilla, we've gotten a lot of run game, and we've gotten a lot of Bill Callahan telling him to keep it close to the vest. I'm really disappointed by that. I really felt like Kevin O'Connell was going to have a chance to prove he belonged in this league as a potential head coaching candidate. I thought he was going to get a chance to prove to us that he has what it takes to potentially be the next guy up in this organization. And I don't think he's getting that chance. And let's be really honest, too. He could be gone at the end of this season. There are a bunch of his buddies that are head coaches around this league There are a bunch of opportunities for him to go elsewhere. If he in his mind says, this is a dysfunctional situation that I don't want to be a part of because that wasn't a great representation of what I am as a coach and a play caller, let me go somewhere else where I can start to spread my wings and show what I'm fully capable of. And he goes elsewhere, and he could end up calling plays for another team or showing what he's capable of. And then next year or the year after that, he's head coaching for somebody else and being successful. And yet again, another bright offensive mind leaves Washington and succeeds elsewhere. That's a realistic possibility, especially when you go outside the organization looking to hire someone. They want to bring in their own staff. They want to bring in their own guys. Now, the Redskins could tell them, look, if you're going to take this job, Kevin O'Connell comes with the job. And that's something that isn't out of the realm of possibility. However, who's to say that Kevin wants to stay here? So it's really intriguing how this whole situation can go. All of that could have been avoided, however, if Kevin O'Connell would have been promoted to head coach, because then he would have been running the show. He would have been running the offense, and we would have gotten a sense of how a team run by Kevin O'Connell would operate, because he would be in control of the day-to-day organization of this team. He would be in control of how the locker room responded and how this team performed on a Sunday-to-Sunday basis. And we would have gotten to see a glimpse of what Kevin O'Connell really would have been like. It would have been almost like a test drive of sorts of Kevin O'Connell being a head coach for this team on a permanent basis. And instead, I felt like we got robbed. We got robbed of seeing this guy call plays. We got robbed of seeing this guy potentially be a head coach. We got robbed of seeing if this guy had what it takes to be a real head coach for this team. Forget about someone else, for this team. And I just felt like that's the one thing that I would have changed with this season. And so finally, we get to my last topic, and you already know the answer to this because it's already on the screen, but my reasons for hope. All right, what's your reason for hope for this team and into the future? And I made a mistake earlier with the graphic, but that's my reason for hope. Most improved was supposed to be Quentin Dunbar and Eric Flowers. But my reason for hope is Dwayne Haskins, Terry McLaurin, and this defensive line. Right now, those are my beacons of light right now on what is a morbidly dark season for the Washington Redskins. I know this roster is talented. I see I see some of the reasons for hope with some other players. And I see the flashes of potential brilliance with some guys on this roster, like a Sean Dion Hamilton, like a Cole Holcomb, even Montez Sweat. I've seen flashes from him. I think he needs to be coached better. I think he needs a different scheme. But I've seen flashes from Montez Sweat. We've seen flashes from some of the other guys, like a Troy Apke. We've seen flashes from some guys. All right. Offensively, we've seen flashes from some guys. All right. But at the end of the day, I've seen flashes from Kelvin Harmon. I like Kelvin Harmon. I think he's going to be a good receiver for this team. We've seen flashes from some guys, but at the end of the day, Dwayne Haskins and his development is a reason for hope. Terry McLaurin and what he's been able to do, despite having a revolving door at quarterback and no consistency whatsoever around him, is a reason for hope. And then the Redskins defensive line. You say what you want about these guys, and I was looking for Daron Payne to have a breakout year this year. The preseason looked so impressive. I was looking for him to impact the game, not just as a run defender, but also as a guy that could get to the quarterback. That hasn't materialized. I already know what I have in Matt Ioannidis. I know what he brings to the table. I know he's a stud. I'm confident that Matt Ioannidis every single year is going to get anywhere from 6 to 8 sacks and is going to be a constant disruptor up front. Love what he brings to the table. Feel confident moving forward that if he's healthy, he's going to be a difference maker. Jonathan Allen, same thing can be said for him. I was a little disappointed with him this year in terms of sacks, but I knew from past years watching him play that he's not a guy that's going to just beat a guy one-on-one and win. And so he's a guy that you run twists and stunts, and he's going to be able to get victories off of that. So, but they've been good against the run for the most part this season. And This defensive line, we've seen it show up on 4th and 1s where we've gotten some crucial stops down by the goal line in the middle of the field. Minnesota tried us and tried to disrespect us on a 4th and 1, and we stopped them. The Bills tried to disrespect us on a 4th and 1, stopped them. We've seen the defensive line step up and make plays. Tim Settle is a guy that I like. I think this is a group that we can build around and start there and kind of build the rest of the defense. And so they're a reason for hope. Outside of those guys, I don't see a lot of hope on this team. I would love to add Darius Geis to this list. He's going to determine that. His health, his play down the final 7 games of the season is going to determine whether he's also a reason for hope. Kevin O'Connell, I'd love to put him on this list, but we don't know what is Kevin O'Connell and what is Bill Callahan. Really, we should be able to tell. And I told you, I knew that wasn't him. And I think that line is clearly drawn in the sand. When you see a Kevin O'Connell play, you can identify that. And when you see 9 straight runs, you know who that is. So I would love to put Kevin O'Connell on this list, but there's just no way you can put Kevin O'Connell on this list because you don't really know what you have in him as a play caller. And so those are my items for the Redskins midseason report. What do you have for those items? Most surprising, most disappointing, most improved, team MVP, one thing you change about the season, and then your reason for hope in the future. Those are all mine, with the exception of most improved. Again, my most improved 2 players, Quentin Dunbar on the defensive side and Eric Flowers on the offensive side. So those are my midseason reports there. What are yours? Want to see it down in the discussion and down in the comment section of this video. Also, would love to see a like and a subscription if you haven't already subscribed to the Louie T Network. I am a Redskins fan, etched in burgundy and gold. My Redskins spirit will never die. Redskins spirit will never fold. Until we meet again, hail to our beloved Washington Redskins. One sidebar note before we go. There's a massive college football game this weekend. Number 1, LSU versus number 2, Alabama. If you're a Redskins fan and you want to do some early college scouting for this team, because we're going to have a top 5 pick most likely than not, one of those players on the field on Saturday afternoon, 3:30 Eastern Standard Time, is likely going to be a pick for this team. Most likely. All right. There's no guarantees. All right. I still want Chase Young, despite him being suspended. I still want Chase Young. But, you know, if we're not in a position to take Chase Young and we're not going to be in the market for a quarterback, maybe we're in the market for a wide receiver. Maybe we're in the market for something else. Either way, that game is going to have so much talent on the field at once. It behoove you to take a gander at that game because there are going to be a lot of high-level prospects playing in that football game. But I digress. You guys enjoy the weekend. Enjoy this bye week. You don't have to stomach a Redskins game in week 10. Enjoy, all right? Because after this week, you got 7 more weeks of this team, and hopefully they're much better than the first 9. In any event, I'm your man Louie T signing off. Until next time, you guys enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you guys on Monday for a new edition of the Redskins Nightly News. Have a good one.
Louie T Network.